In 1995, the debut self-titled Foo Fighters record was released. 30 years later, this album still frequently tops the list for fans as the best work Dave Grohl has ever produced. This is an important record. It marks Dave's return to creating music after the sudden and tragic end of Nirvana and has led to a decades-long career fronting one of the largest mainstream rock bands of the 21st century. The story of this first album has been told countless times, but to an extent, its production remains shrouded in mystery. Hardly any media from this recording session exists, and as such, the identity of the equipment and the process for achieving the uniquely raw and unfiltered sound of this record has been long debated among fans. At the center of it all, a mysterious little amplifier has piqued our interest for years. The amp responsible for the fuzzy, gritty sound heard on iconic songs like Weenie Beanie and Exhausted. In this video, we're going to take a deep dive into the secret weapon used to record the Foo Fighters' self-titled debut album. This is the can. I finally found one. The can. What the hell is this thing? Okay, so we're coming up on the 30-year anniversary of the debut Foo Fighters self-titled record. I've been obsessed with this album for a while. Admittedly, when I first started getting into Foo Fighters, it took me a while to make my way to the debut album, but when I finally did, I was just blown away by the vibe. And that's the best way I can describe it. This album has a vibe. It's the vibe. Something about the songwriting and the production itself is different than any other Foo Fighters record, and I absolutely love it. It just sounds so spur of the moment, and it sounds kind of lo-fi, but none of the music suffers because of that. I've been obsessed with this album ever since I really gave it a good listen. And since then, I've also been obsessed with the gear that was used to achieve these sounds, most notably the guitar equipment, because guitar player. Over the years, I've been researching what kind of guitars were used, what kind of amps were used, and throughout my studies, I've been hearing these whispers and rumors of this mythical gas can amp. People talk about this in forums all the time. It's been mentioned in interviews from Dave himself, as well as the producer Barrett Jones, but the story's never quite been straight. It's changed over the years from a gas can to an oil can to a microphone placed inside of a metal gas can to achieve the sound, but I don't think anyone really knew what it was that was making that sound that I was hearing. A couple years ago, Barrett Jones, the producer of the first Foo Fighters album, did an Ask Me Anything live stream on his YouTube channel, and I happened to stumble across it. One of the first questions I asked him when I jumped in was, "Oh my God, you have to show me the can. What is the can? Do you still have it?"
The can. It's right over here. The can.
And that's when I first laid my eyes on one of these. So immediately I got to work. I was like, I gotta have one. I mean, that's so cool. It's literally an amp built into a gas can. Unfortunately, these are really, really, really hard to find. I've been searching on Reverb and eBay and just about everywhere else for months and months and months trying to come across one of these, and they just don't show up. I've done a little bit of digging into the history of this and like who made it and everything, and we will definitely dive into that. Just know that it's absolutely crazy that I stumbled on this. The story is wild, and I'm so thankful I have one, and what a cool little piece of gear. So let's get started. Let's talk about the can. All right, saddle up because it's time for a history lesson. So in the 70s, a musical instrument manufacturer and distributor called St. Louis Music started getting into the amp building game. They wanted to make and sell their own guitar and bass amps. So they partnered with a local electronic technician and established SLM Electronics, which was their division to start designing these amps. This would go on to eventually become the brand known as Crate Amplifiers. In the 80s, they also acquired the bass amp manufacturer Ampeg, where they reintroduced the famous SVT tube amp line. So in 1985, SLM Electronics designed this small, portable, battery-powered amp meant to be used by buskers called the Can. The amp's controls and 5-inch speaker were mounted inside what resembled a red plastic jerry can used to hold gasoline. Approximately 10,000 of these amps were made, and they were distributed in the 80s from the Crate Amp Factory. Eventually, one of these amps made its way into the hands of Seattle musician and producer Barrett Jones. Jones was living with and working on music with Dave Grohl around this time, and the two experimented with the fizzy, buzzing distortion that the Can amp Amp produced. This led to the recording of the famous Pocket Watch cassette demo tape, released under the pseudonym Late. In October of 1994, Dave and Barrett booked 6 days at Robert Lang Studios in Seattle. The resulting 15 tracks recorded during this time would become the first Foo Fighters album. Okay, so by this point, I had the who, the what, the when, and the where figured out about these amps, right? The hardest part was the how. How am I going to get my hands on one of these? Because like I said before, I had been searching everywhere. Reverb, eBay, Guitar Center, anywhere that sold used music gear, I was searching for it. I was scrubbing every different version of a Google search you could make for a gas can amplifier. I got so desperate that I tracked down a guy on Instagram who had posted a video of himself playing through one of these 12 years ago and asked him if he would sell it to me, and he wouldn't do it. Eventually, I enlisted the help of a friend of mine who runs a vintage collectible store, and he goes and finds weird oddball collectibles for people, and I put him on the hunt. I said, dude, if you find one of these, let me know, I will buy it. I mean, much respect to him, he did his due diligence. Like, he went out and tried to find one of these, scanned all across the country, went through every contact he knew, just couldn't find one. I was about to give up. He sat me down and he was like, look, dude, this is what I do for a living. I don't think you're gonna come across one of these. I can't find one anywhere. They're just too weird and uncommon. They're probably all sitting in a pawn shop somewhere, and I don't know if you're ever gonna find one. Maybe you will. At that moment, as he's telling me that, I just casually happen to open up my Facebook Marketplace feed, and what do I see but the can? It was one state over. As I'm talking to him, like I'm in the process of giving up, and there it is for $100. So I freaked out a little bit, and I messaged the guy right away, and I was like, you don't understand, I need this, okay? He was very cool, but I'm sure, as you all know, doing any kind of business on Facebook Marketplace is sketchy at best. So I was very worried that something was going to happen, and I wasn't going to be able to get this amp. Somebody was going to snake it out from under me, and then what were we going to do? Because they just don't show up. Thankfully, I'm able to put my fears to rest because the amp did eventually arrive, and now I'm gonna kick it to past JEEJ for a little unboxing video. What's up, future JEEJ? It's past JEEJ. Okay, wow, I can't believe I actually found this. I'm really excited to open this up. Let's get our handy dandy box cutter here. I'm doing my best to not show you my address and dox myself. Come on. Oh wow, what the heck is going on here? This is quite the box job, but we sure do appreciate all the effort. My God. Oh. No way. The can. Okay, I have to know. This could literally work as like a gas can. I mean, I think that's actually what it is. I mean, duh, but like, open vent before pouring. Okay, so here's what I don't understand, because like it actually has like gas can, like level fill warning stuff on it. It has like a safe level thing, but also it is stamped with the can. Like it's actually stamped with the manufacturer and like amp stuff. Dude, this is wild. So, where's the power button? Does it just turn on when you plug it in? Let's see what else we got. Oh, nice. Cord inserted into input turns on like guitar pedal. That's helpful. And we even have our AC power cord. Dude, this is nuts. The can. Oh, I can't wait to plug this in and hear how it sounds. Crazy. This video is giving me the unique opportunity to make a point that I've wanted to make for a long time. Bad guitar tone doesn't exist. What does exist are guitar players who just don't know how to utilize it in the proper context. I mean, people have been doing this for years. For example, Sympathy for the Devil by Rolling Stones. Objectively, that is a terrible guitar tone, but could you imagine it sounding like anything else? Take a look at modern day, guys like Jack White and Josh Homme. Remember the PV Decade thing?
This is a PV Decade. This thing is incredible.
I mean, that's a crappy little 10-watt amp. And once he revealed that's the secret sauce to the tone,
Here comes the money.
you know, there it is. What I'm getting at here is everybody has an idea in their head of what good guitar tone is, right? A Les Paul through a Marshall or a Mesa rectifier or something, this huge wall of sound. And it's true, a lot of amazing music has been built on that platform. But what I've found throughout my years of experimenting with creating my own music is sometimes the most memorable guitar moments are those that are unique and don't sound like every other wall of Marshall stacks. And that's where you start to delve into these weird little crummy, objectively bad sounding pieces of gear that produce shocking results in the context of a mix. On its own, this thing sounds like a plastic can full of bees, right? It's bad. It's a bad sound, but it's also a great sound. And that's what I'm getting at is in your own music, don't be afraid to make it sound weird or really push the limits of what the guitar should or could sound like. You'll end up with much more memorable guitar sounds in your music. I think this is a perfect example of that. The reason I wanted this one specifically is just because I'm influenced by the music that this was used to create, but it doesn't have to be this amp. I mean, you can achieve this effect with any number of battery-powered crummy little amps, whether it's a pig nose or one of the little battery-powered Marshall stacks. They'll all get you close, but it's more about using something unconventional to create interesting spots in your music. So we finally managed to get our hands on the can. Mission accomplished, right? Well, not exactly. I still wanted to get a first-hand account of how and why this little amp was used on the first Foo Fighters record. Unfortunately, attempts to reach out to Mr. Grohl himself have been difficult.
Hey, it's Dr. G. Leave a message. Unless it's JEEJ. Stop calling me.
So I thought, who better to reach out to than the producer of the album and the owner of the exact amp we're documenting himself, Mr. Barrett Jones. Here we go, Barrett Jones. Thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm super excited to kind of geek out about gear and stuff with you. Before we really dive in, if you could just kind of give me a little background on how you got into recording and producing and stuff. Because I have a feeling that you and I maybe shared the same experience, because I know you're a guitarist and a songwriter too. And maybe in some of your bands, you were kind of relegated to the guy who knew how to record things. So how did you get into that?
Yeah, so I was in a band when I was 15 called The Survivors. We were a cover band. In the ashes of that band breaking up, I found in my house a little Radio Shack, if you know who Radio Shack is, little Radio Shack mixer, which was basically 4 volume knobs with 1/4-inch inputs, and it had like 1 RCA output. My mom had this little handheld cassette recorder that she used she was a psychologist. I put like 4 mics or whatever I could find from, the little square mics that came with recording with cassette recorders and stuff like that. I put them around a drum kit and I recorded that into her little thing and just made a drum track. This all happened literally in one day. I found the mixer thing. I found it, I figured out, like, let's try this. And I recorded a drum track, and then I took that cassette of the drum track, put it back into the mixer, and recorded some guitars, and then recorded a bass, and then recorded vocals, and recorded a song.
So did you know that was the process of how that was done, or was this all just trial and error? Like
no, it's I mean, it just seemed logical in my head. Thought I'd try it, and then that day I recorded like 2 songs.
So talk to me then about how does that evolve? Then you start like acquiring different gear. I mean, what's the research process like?
I probably got a stereo reel to reel at some point, but fairly soon after, like I think by the time I was 17, I got a 4-track. a Tascam 34. At that point, I then started recording my friend's band.
Did you ever fall down the rabbit hole back then of like experimenting with different microphones, different mic techniques? I mean, obviously back then it was probably whatever you could get your hands on.
Yeah,
like,
it was just whatever I had. I don't think I owned a condenser mic until I don't even remember the first condenser mic I got. It was like 10 years later or something like that. It was all 57s and
Yep.
I had some weird EV mics that I still have that I never use. They're just like all mid-range. They're probably meant for broadcast or something like that.
Well, it's funny you mention that because, I feel like a lot of this gear, you see all these little niche pockets of indie producers who are discovering this gear, which probably wasn't originally used for its intended purpose. Like you say, these microphones used for broadcast. I mean, you hear about guys who are taking video projector sound amplifiers and turning them into guitar amps and stuff.
Right.
And I guess specifically with the can, that's a great segue, is like this gear that on its own, objectively, is not that great of a sound, but it led to, these really iconic sounds that everyone now tries to achieve on their own, which maybe sounds silly to you. I don't know. What's your thoughts on that?
I was all about that. Just experimenting with whatever was around. I've always been the person who doesn't have everything that I want, and I will just make whatever is available sound as good as it can.
All right, well, let's pivot a little bit to the can. The first time I even heard about this amp was...
Yours looks so new. Oh my God.
Well, yeah, I lucked out with this big time. But the first time I ever saw one of these was in the Ask Me Anything live stream that you did, I think 2022. I was the one that was just pestering you with all those questions. I was like,
really?
I gotta see. Because before that, I had seen interviews that you had given. I'd read interviews, and I'm like, what is that sound? Like, that's the stuff that I just totally nerd out about. And I had read all these interviews with both you and Dave where you guys are like, yeah, it's this little gas can thing. And then like I'd read on these forums and people would be like, yeah, I'm pretty sure they placed a microphone inside an oil can in front of an amp and that's how they got it. And like just totally, the game of telephone where they're turning it into something it's not. The thing I worry about is that the details about this amp are going to get out. And people are going to know that this is what was used on that record. And it's going to turn into the PV Decade thing. Do you know about this? Like with the Josh Homme amp?
I do know. I mean, it's funny. I've used that amp on way more than just that record. Probably like 20 records I've used that amp on. Almost every every record I produced back in the 90s and early 2000s, I would take that amp with me and put it on somewhere.
So... Where'd you find it? Was it just like in a music store somewhere that you came across it?
I was in London, actually. It was 1988, and I was in London, and I found it at like a pawn shop. And I was just looking for a battery-powered amp that I could play.
So you weren't looking for an amp for any recording purposes?
No,
it was just so you could plug in and jam?
Exactly. It was like 30 pounds or something like that, and it was,
It had nothing to do with the sound or anything like that. It was
no, not at all.
When was the first time you thought to stick a mic in front of it and try recording something with it?
Oh, I mean, probably almost immediately after I started. I don't know.
Was it like a big light bulb moment? You were like, this is so grungy and awesome? Or were you just like...
No. I don't know. I mean, it's funny because there's only like one setting on it that's good, and that's everything all the way up.
Yeah.
And it doesn't sound good by itself. Like, you don't want to use that by itself. It's only good as like texture on top of other guitars.
Absolutely.
It's also good for leads.
Right. Yeah. I've been playing around with it a little bit, and it just sits so well in a mix.
Yeah. Because it's small, that's the whole thing. It's like,
yeah. So I was going to ask, do you have any go-to settings? Like it's some kind of special thing, but
there's only one, all the way up,
all the way up. Well, and what really surprised me about it too is there's no power button. You plug it in and it goes.
That's the on off is by plugging it in. So you don't want to run your batteries down. There's 6 D cell batteries,
which is crazy to me. That's so much battery power. So did you always run it with batteries, or did you have the little adapter for it?
Yeah, I mean, I have adapter. Any computer adapter will work.
Well, I know because there's going to be some nerd that claims that the battery has to be sagged to like 60% to get the tone or whatever. So just to clear that up.
It does make a difference. There's nothing better than a power-starved amp sound.
Yeah, exactly. What kind of guitar do you think sounds the best through it? Do you tend to run things with humbuckers, single coils?
Yeah, humbuckers.
Yeah.
Yeah, the more output on the guitar, the better, really.
Yeah. What about mics? I know you've said you're a big 57 guy. Do you ever use any other mics on it, or is it just a 57?
No, just a 57. It's such a teeny, what is that, a 6-inch speaker? So.
Yeah, something like 5 or 6, I think. Do you tend to just like put it right on the front, on the center of the cone, or do you do any sort of angle miking or anything like that?
Straight at it, but between the cone and the outside.
Okay.
So that's how I mic every guitar cabinet.
Yeah. And is it right up on it, or do you back it off a couple inches?
Pretty much right up on it. You don't want it touching, but, half an inch away.
Yeah, well, especially with this, because it vibrates so much. I mean, you get it all the way up, and it's just rattling all over the place. You don't want to bump into your mic. You run vocals through it, too, right?
Yeah, we did one of the Weenie Beanies, I think we did with that. I think the recording, I ran it through the Marshall, but I think for the demo of Weenie Beanie, I ran it through that amp.
Okay. And
I could be wrong about it.
Whose idea was it to run a microphone through that? Just like another, sonic palette thing to try out? Or did you know you wanted that really gnarly sound?
It was just easy because you could hold it like a megaphone.
That's great.
You know.
Is there any sort of post-processing treatment that you use on this amp? Like any EQ tricks or compression or anything like that?
No, definitely not. I can't remember specifically ever doing anything to the sound. I maybe try to tame some of the grit on it, but
point made. Like as soon as I plugged it in, the first time I plugged it in, I was like, well, there it is. That's the sound.
Yeah, that's the sound.
Don't really need anything else. So let me ask you a couple questions about the Foo Fighters album now, because we're coming up on 30 years of that first record.
I know, this is the year.
It's funny to me how many people cite that record as their favorite, the best work that has ever come out of not just Foo Fighters, but Dave Grohl. What can you tell me about what you remember from that session and everything that you, I guess that you haven't already told over and over again?
I mean, I've told this story many times, but as I've said before about it, we had recorded 90% of those songs already.
Right.
In my studio on the 8-track. So I think there were maybe 2 of those songs that hadn't been recorded yet. Plus, we had a routine of recording very set, and it was kind of like almost a game about how quick it could be done. So we basically I go in for the first day, I mic everything, get all the sounds for everything. That's the drums, the bass, guitar amps. They're all ready to go. That took, maybe 3 hours to get all the sounds in that room. That was my second time ever in a 24-track studio, like a real studio. So I was like, wow, look at all this stuff. That room is insane. I don't know if you ever seen any.
I've seen the documentary and all the photos. So getting into the 24-track studio, I mean, was it just I'm going to throw up as many mics as I can, or were you still working kind of within the same?
Yeah, no, it was still sort of the same. I didn't go crazy because all it meant was I could, instead of recording drums to 2 tracks in a stereo mix, I could actually separate everything and do 9 tracks of drums or something.
Right.
So once everything was set up, then he would just go in, record the drums, no clicks, no nothing. He would just go in there and in parts where there were no drums, there were not going to be any drums, he would just keep time with his hi-hat. So he'd do a drum take, usually the very first take, just singing the song, hearing the song in his head. Then he'd come in.
He didn't use a scratch track or a reference track?
No, nothing at all. Just in his head. And then he would come in and record a guitar part, and then he would double that, and then he would put a bass on it, and then maybe a lead thing or something like that, and then we'd move on to the next song. And all the vocals were done at the end, and he was still writing some lyrics too at the very end.
That's crazy.
And they were all like double, triple tracked kind of thing. But
right.
See, the thing about him is he's just so good. For one, he's got perfect time. Like his tempo is just perfect and knows how to play exactly with himself. He knows exactly what to play. There's never any, maybe I should try it like this, or maybe I should play it like that. It's like he just There's one way to play it, and he just plays it.
So I wanted to ask you though about guitar stuff specifically. Was there much of a conversation when it came to guitar tone between you and him? Because I mean, the vibe I get from reading interviews with him is that he doesn't pay too much attention to like the sound of the equipment. And I know with you being a guitarist, I mean, were you kind of helping him achieve some of those sounds? Was there any discussion at all on like, here's the amps, or was it all just like, here's what we got, let's plug it in and turn it all the way up?
Basically, I mean, we both liked the same sort of guitar sounds. It was mostly my Marshall JMC 800 or JCM, whatever the fuck. I can always get the backwards. I'm dyslexic, by the way. But yeah, it's just that. I mean, hardly any pedals.
Right. I think I've heard there was like a rat pedal floating around.
Yeah, there was a rat pedal. It was probably this one.
There's the rat pedal. So, and to clear it up, because that's another question. It was a JCM 800 that you guys used in that studio, or was it a 900?
800, never 900. No.
Okay, 800. We don't like the 900.
No. It was mine, and I bought it brand new in 1986, and I still have it. It's the best sounding amp. And it gets that Marshall sound. It's like, that's the sound.
That was all, you guys just took all that gear over to Robert Lang Studios, right? Did you use any of the gear they had in there for guitar stuff?
No, I don't think so. Unless maybe there was a twin in there that we used for like the clean stuff. I mean, I always like to use twins on clean.
And so guitars too. I know this is something everybody kind of goes back and forth on, because I know you said that it was a Les Paul that was used for most of it. Do you recall the Trini being used at all for that session much?
I really don't.
I know it's been 30 years. It's crazy.
I know, and I know he had. I don't remember he having the Trini yet. I think he had a Les Paul. We had my guitars, which I'm sure got used just for. Whenever you make doubles, it's good to use a different guitar just for a little bit of different sound. And I think he only had that. I don't know if he had the Trini yet or if he used it. I think he had that sort of the brown tobacco sunburst Les Paul, the one that you see in that the Velvet Elvis.
Yes, the pictures from like their first gigs and stuff. Yeah, yep.
I also, when I bought that Marshall, I had this, which is a Melody Maker reissue that I got at the exact same time. This guitar is fucking awesome. This is like, I swear, it's really light. It plays like a dream. I'm pretty sure that got used a lot too.
Okay. And just to kind of contrast with the other Les Paul. I seem to remember there was some conversation about a third amp. Like there was the Marshall, there was the gas can, and then there was another amp. Maybe Dave had mentioned it in one of the Sonic Highways outtakes that was like something on the verge of blowing up. Was he talking about the gas can, or there was like another?
So that is probably the story from the amp that was used on the demo version of Exhausted. If you go look at that Sonic Highways outtake of Exhausted, we talk about it. We talk about that there. So I had this weird head. I don't even know what it was. It was just totally dying. And it got the coolest guitar tone out of it. We probably put even more distortion into it. It was just like breaking up and falling apart. And that amp did eventually die like soon after that.
That's awesome.
The sound on the album version of Exhausted is not quite as cool or the same as the demo version.
And so when you guys went to Robert Lang, I guess I probably should have cleared this up earlier. When you did the actual album session, it was the can used on that, right?
Oh, yeah. Not well, I mean, it was over top of the regular guitars. It's there, but it's not the main guitar by any chance. It doesn't have any body, that thing. So it's just sort of a textural thing that's laid on top. And
so when I listen to the intro of Exhausted specifically, that to me is where I can hear that amp, the can, the most, is because it's just the solo guitar by itself and it's really fuzzed out. Would that be only the can, or do you think you blended that with anything else?
I'm gonna have to look I'm crossing my fingers that I'm going to get a chance to listen to those multi-tracks for the first time in 30 years soon.
Oh,
So
wow. That's awesome. That's amazing. So you
yeah,
don't
I'm
have
really
access to
curious.
those
No,
files? Oh, wow.
no, I have not heard the multi-tracks since we mixed the record.
Oh my gosh, that's gonna be something else. Well, hopefully you get to do something with those. Do you get, was there many notes that were taken like during the recording? I mean, were you guys doing studio notes like?
I'm the worst at notes. No, I don't.
So you didn't keep a journal with
Documentation.
all your microphone settings and everything?
No, this was back way before you had any access to that stuff, and I just, I was much more in the moment. I've always had issues with writing things down anyway, so.
So any other songs? Like I said, I mean, Exhausted and Weenie Beanie are the two ones that stood out to me. But you're saying, I mean, was the can just kind of peppered in throughout the album as like little?
Maybe there's some accents. I don't recall off the top of my head where else it was used. It's possible it got used for textural stuff on choruses. As I said, that's usually how it was used and not like spotlighted.
Yeah, I feel like there's a couple other places I can hear it. Maybe in like Good Grief, there's a spot
Oh yeah,
where
it's in Good Grief.
which is great. I really love that song. I mean, is there a specific song on the Foo Fighters album that you think best demonstrates the tone of the can?
Probably Weenie Beanie. I would think.
Overexhausted?
Yeah, I'd have to go back and listen. It's been a while since I ever listened to it. Yeah, it does kind of sound like the can, doesn't it?
I mean, it sure sounded like it to me. I threw a
Yeah.
57 on there, but I don't know if it's blended on top of anything or if that's just the can by itself.
I mean, it might have just been the wow. Yeah, I mean, I have not listened to this stuff forever. So it's funny. I usually listen to the demos. Oh yeah, Weenie Beanie for sure.
Yeah.
I think Weenie Beanie probably overexhausted. Yeah, that's all the can.
Yeah.
You saw the short that I did with the can, right?
I did, yeah.
Yeah,
And
okay.
and everyone was like, "Well, there it is." Like, that's the end.
Sound.
So, and if we play our cards right here, I genuinely think the value of these is we're gonna have another PV Decade situation.
I mean, they're hard to find. It's funny because it's made by the fucking company that makes Sandpeg. So, I mean, you could probably build your own circuit pretty easily if you reverse engineer that thing. There's not a lot on there.
There's not much going on. No, you open the back panel and then it's
Yeah.
just the thing. So the can amp, there it
The
is.
can amp. The can.
Well, Barrett, thank you so much for taking the time. It was a pleasure talking with you, and
Pleasure talking with you.
I genuinely hope someday I'm able to make it out there and book some kind of session and do some music with you, because I'd love to come out and see the studio sometime. But
Yeah, that'd be cool.
anyway, thank you again for taking the time, Barrett, and
Alrighty.
be in touch.
Take it easy.
All right, see ya. Wow, that was incredible. A tremendous thank you to Barrett Jones for being so generous with his time and agreeing to do that interview with me. That was so cool to hear about the story of that album from somebody who experienced it firsthand. Unfortunately, that interview is a shortened version of the full conversation we had, and I do intend on releasing a longer version where we go a lot more in depth into some different topics on my channel later, but I wanted to keep it a little bit shorter for this video. Fascinating conversation with him though. After we got done talking, I actually went back and listened to the entire album again, and I was really surprised because to my ears, I can suddenly hear the can all over this album. I didn't get an official confirmation from him. I don't know if Barrett himself would remember exactly what it was used on, but to me, I can hear this on This Is a Call. I can definitely hear it on Good Grief now. I think I can hear it in some of the bridge sections on Alone and Easy Target. I think it's the amp that was used for the intro of Watershed. I definitely still hear it in Exhausted. And of course, Weenie Beanie, which, as Barrett said, is probably the best example of this amp used throughout the album. But that was super cool. Thanks again, Barrett. And I'm so glad we had a chance to talk. But we're not done here yet. So for some reason, it just wasn't enough for me to get the amp, do this whole video, interview Barrett Jones, and do all this stuff. I wanted to do more. I wanted to make this tone available to anyone watching. Recently, I've fallen down the rabbit hole of the dark art known as amp capturing. For those of you unaware of the technology, this has been popularized a few years back from the Quad Cortex and the Kemper amp profiling systems. And basically what we're doing is using machine learning to take a recorded audio signal of a guitar amp or a speaker and turn it into a patch or a guitar amp sim that you can then use to play your own instrument through and get that exact tone. Recently, I've stumbled across this website called Tone 3000, which used to be called Tone Hunt. It's an open source community of guitar players who are uploading these patches of their own guitar gear, and you can download these and use them with a free plugin called Neural Amp Modeler. So if you have a recording software at home and you're familiar with using amp sim plugins, it works exactly like that. And you can go on this database and download for free whatever amp you can find on there. And guys have uploaded some really awesome sounding rigs. I wanted to create my own capture of the can. So if anyone was interested in using this tone, they would be able to download that patch and use it with the Neural Amp Modeler. Now, I'm not going to tell you that the patch that I created sounds exactly like this amp in the room. And in a minute, we're going to do a side-by-side test and you can kind of hear for yourself. There's a few little variations, but for a free software that anyone can contribute to, I think it sounds pretty great. And especially for the use case that we discussed with Barrett earlier, if you're just looking for that gritty, fizzy little guitar sound, poke through the mix and really grunge it up, I think this patch will sound really good. So let's take a listen, and in the description of this video, I'm going to leave a download link where you can get your own patch of the can off of Tone 3000. So let's check it out. Okay, so we know this thing does the Foo Fighters sound, right? I've been playing Foo Fighters riffs for the last 40 minutes. But one of the things I really like to do in these videos where I'm reviewing a new piece of gear is to write my own original song to hear what it sounds like in the context of my music. And I always find it a fun little challenge to try and write a song that's related to the subject of the video. So I put together this little song, obviously very Foo Fighters inspired, but there's some neat little Easter eggs in the lyrics, and I'm using the can for it. So take a listen. All right, I think that's going to do it. Man, what a super fun video. A couple of shout outs. First of all, again, a huge thank you to Barrett Jones for taking the time. Really appreciate him sitting down and having that interview with me. That was super awesome. Big thanks to my buddy Ron at Studio 81 for allowing me to come into the space and get that beautiful B-roll footage at the beginning. That was a lot of fun as well. If any of you guys are in the Midwest and you're looking for video production of any kind, make sure you check out Studio 81. I'll leave a link to them in the description as well. If you'd like to support me directly, the best thing you can do is subscribe. If you are really loving this content, I'm also going to leave a couple links where you can support me directly. Just know if you decide to contribute to either of those links, that all of that money will just be going right back into the channel to make some more cool content, which I can promise you there is more coming on the horizon. If you like this, make sure to like, subscribe, comment. I've been reading super nice comments from everybody on my last few videos. I feel like I've been doing so much Foo Fighters content lately. Like I've been starting to meet more and more people within the Foo Fighters, not just the fan community, but like in the Foo Fighters camp, which is cool. Someday it's going to happen. Someday we'll wrangle up Grohl for an interview. I don't know when, I don't know how. He keeps a low profile these days, but we're going to make it happen. Maybe we'll talk about the can. All right, we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.